The roar of Harley-Davidson motorcycles shattered the morning calm as dozens of Hell's Angels thundered into the parking lot of St. Michael's Church. Clad in leather, denim, and dark sunglasses, they looked more like an invading army than mourners at a funeral. But beneath the hardened exteriors, a profound grief weighed on the bikers. They were here to say goodbye to Vince Maverick Johnson, their beloved chapter president, who had died in a tragic accident. The church, a small white clapboard building nestled among towering oaks, seemed to tremble under the onslaught of growling engines. Father O'Malley, the parish priest, watched nervously from the steps as the bikers dismounted, their boots crunching on the gravel. He had agreed to host Maverick's funeral out of respect for the man's family, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was a powder keg waiting to explode. Have you ever witnessed raw grief masked by toxic masculinity? If you want to see what happens when that facade cracks, smash that subscribe button, because this story is about to take an unforgettable turn. As the bikers filed into the church, their somber procession was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A group of Hell's Angels had surrounded a black family, a mother and her 2 young daughters. "What are you doing here?" one biker sneered, his voice dripping with hostility. "This is a private funeral. No place for you people." The mother, Serena Thompson, held her ground. She was no stranger to racism, having faced it all her life, but she refused to let it intimidate her. Not here, not now. "Maverick was our neighbor," she said calmly, looking the biker straight in the eye. "He looked out for us. We're here to pay our respects, just like you." But the bikers weren't having it. They closed ranks, physically blocking the family's path. Some revved their engines menacingly, the sound echoing off the church walls. "Bullshit," another growled. He was a hulking man with a thick beard and cold, pitiless eyes. "Maverick never mentioned no black family, probably here to case the joint, see what you can steal." Serena's daughters, 12-year-old Jasmine and 8-year-old Aaliyah, clung to their mother, eyes wide with fear. They had never seen so much hate directed at them, never felt the weight of centuries of oppression bearing down like a physical force. The confrontation escalated quickly. Bikers began jostling the family, their faces twisted with rage. Racial epithets filled the air, each one landing like a blow. "Bet they're drug dealers, just like the rest of them." Should have known Maverick was a lover. Probably got AIDS from banging their whore mother. Serena tried to shield her daughters, but there were too many of them. A beefy Hell's Angel with white power tattooed on his neck shoved her roughly to the ground. She hit the pavement hard, crying out as her palms were shredded on the asphalt. Jasmine and Aaliyah screamed, terrified, as the bikers closed in. One made a grab for Aaliyah's hair, yanking cruelly. "Go on, cry. That's all you people are good for." Another kicked Serena in the ribs as she tried to crawl to her daughters. The sound of his steel-toed boot connecting with flesh was sickeningly loud. Father O'Malley tried to intervene, but he was shoved aside roughly, his pleas for calm unheeded. It was chaos, a swirling vortex of hate and violence that seemed to have no end. And at the center of it all, 3 innocent lives about to be swallowed whole. If you're still watching, it's because you know the power of a single voice to change everything. Keep watching, because in exactly 60 seconds, this little girl is about to silence a mob with nothing but the power of her song. Suddenly, a voice rang out over the chaos. "Stop! Please, just stop!" Everyone turned to see Aaliyah, tears streaming down her face, standing defiantly in front of the church steps. In her hands, she clutched a piece of paper, the edges crumpled from her tight grip. A Hell's Angel with a graying beard, one of the few who hadn't participated in the attack, stepped forward. He snatched the paper from Aaliyah's hands, scanning it quickly, his face drained of color. "It's from Maverick," he said hoarsely, "his last request. He wanted the little girl to sing at his funeral." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. The bikers looked at each other in disbelief, their anger giving way to confusion. If this moment gave you chills, hit that like button and leave a comment about a time when a child's bravery stopped you in your tracks. And keep watching, because Aaliyah's story is just getting started. Aaliyah stepped forward, her chin trembling but her gaze steady. "Maverick was my friend," she said, her high, sweet voice carrying to every stunned face. "He taught me to be brave, and he loved when I sang." She took a deep breath and began to sing. It was Amazing Grace, the hymn that had comforted generations of the oppressed and downtrodden. Her voice was pure and clear, each note soaring over the stunned crowd like a prayer. It was a sound of hope, of resilience, of the unbreakable human spirit. As she sang, the bikers began to weep. These hardened men, who had seen unspeakable violence and committed terrible acts, were brought to their knees by the power of a child's song. They wept for Maverick, for the brother they had lost. They wept for their own shattered lives, for the pain they carried like a hidden wound. And they wept for the innocence they had almost destroyed in their blind hate. When the song was finished, the silence was broken only by the sound of sobbing. The Hell's Angels, these fearsome warriors of the road, had been utterly undone. The bearded biker knelt down to Aaliyah's level, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, little one. We didn't know. Please, please forgive us." He helped Serena to her feet, brushing off her torn and bloodied clothes. "Maverick never told us, but if he wanted your daughter to sing, then that's what's going to happen." As the family made their way into the church, the bikers parted like the Red Sea, their heads bowed in shame. They had come to bury their brother, but they had found something else entirely, a reckoning. The church fell silent as Aaliyah took her seat next to her mother, the last echoes of her song fading into the rafters. The Hell's Angels, these hardened men who had seen and done so much, were still reeling from the power of her voice, from the way it had cracked open their calloused hearts and exposed the raw, aching humanity beneath. Marcus Stinger Harding, the chapter vice president, was the first to speak. He made his way to the podium, his massive frame dwarfing the delicate wood. He cleared his throat, once, twice, trying to find the words. "Maverick." His voice cracked on the name and he had to pause, swallowing hard. Maverick was more than just our president. He was our brother. He saw things in people, things they didn't even see in themselves. He believed in second chances, in the power of redemption. Stinger's gaze found Aaliyah, and he flinched, as if the sight of her was a physical blow. "I think that's why he befriended this little girl and her family. He saw something in them, something good and pure. And we almost destroyed that." A murmur went through the church, a rustle of leather and denim as the bikers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They couldn't meet each other's eyes, couldn't bear to see their own shame reflected back at them. Father O'Malley stepped forward, his kind face creased with sorrow. "Vince Maverick Johnson was a man who understood the power of love," he said softly. "He knew that it could bridge any divide, heal any wound. He saw the best in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves." The priest's words seemed to hang in the air, a challenge and a benediction all at once. The bikers felt the weight of them, the way they pressed against the walls of prejudice and hate that they had built around their hearts. Serena, Aaliyah's mother, stood then, her movements stiff with pain. The bruises from the bikers' attack were already darkening on her skin, a mottled testament to their brutality. But when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "Maverick was our friend," she said simply. "He looked out for us, made sure we had what we needed. He taught my girls that they could be anything, do anything, no matter what the world told them." She looked out at the sea of faces, the tattooed and scarred visages of the men who had so recently been her attackers. "I know you're hurting," she said softly. "I know you're angry and afraid. But Maverick, he wouldn't have wanted this. He wouldn't have wanted his death to be an excuse for more hate, more violence. The bikers shifted again, a ripple of unease going through them. They knew she was right, knew that they had betrayed everything Maverick had stood for. Aaliyah stood then, her small frame trembling, but her voice steady. "Maverick used to tell me that music has power," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "He said it could change hearts, change minds. He believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." She took a deep breath and began to sing. It was a simple tune, a lullaby that Maverick had taught her, but in her voice it became something more, something transcendent. The words spoke of love, of forgiveness, of the unbreakable bonds of human connection. They seemed to wrap around the bikers, to seep into their very bones, melting away the years of anger and pain and fear. And as she sang, something miraculous happened. The bikers began to join in, their rough, untrained voices blending with hers in a harmony that was as raw and powerful as it was unexpected. They sang of brotherhood, of loyalty, of the ties that bind even the most disparate of souls. They sang of Maverick, of the man who had brought them together, who had shown them a better way. When the song ended, there was a moment of perfect, crystalline silence. Then, as one, the Hell's Angels stood. They removed their helmets, baring their heads in a gesture of respect and humility. Stinger stepped forward, his eyes glistening with tears. "Aaliyah," he said hoarsely, we don't deserve your forgiveness. We don't deserve your grace. But if you can find it in your heart to sing for Maverick, to honor him the way he would have wanted, we would be grateful beyond words." Aaliyah nodded, her small face solemn. She understood the weight of what was being asked of her, the power of the moment. She began to sing again, her voice rising pure and clear over the congregation. It was "Amazing Grace," the hymn that had comforted so many, that had been a balm to so many wounded souls. The bikers wept openly as she sang, their tears tracing paths through the grime and the ink on their faces. They wept for Maverick, for the friend and brother they had lost. They wept for the pain and the hardship of their own lives, for the choices that had led them to this moment. And they wept for the hate they had harbored, the prejudice that had poisoned their souls. They saw it now for what it was, a cancer that had eaten away at their humanity, that had blinded them to the beauty and the worth of the world around them. As Aaliyah's voice soared to the heavens, the Hell's Angels felt something shift within them. It was a sense of peace, of purpose, of the possibility of redemption. They knew that they had a long road ahead of them, that the wounds they had inflicted would not heal overnight. But they also knew that they had been given a second chance, a chance to be the men that Maverick had always believed they could be. When the service was over, the bikers filed out of the church, their steps heavy with the weight of their guilt and their grief. But as they stepped into the sunlight, they felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, they could find their way back to the light. Aaliyah and her family were the last to leave. As they stood on the steps of the church, the Hell's Angels gathered around them, their faces a mix of shame and gratitude. Stinger stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing Serena and her daughters. But when he spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. "We know we can't undo what we did," he said, his eyes fixed on the ground. "We know we can't take back the hurt, the fear. But we want to try to make it right. Aaliyah, we want to pay for your music lessons, for as long as you want to take them. And Serena, we want to help you and your family in any way we can. It's what Maverick would have wanted." Serena looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. She saw the sincerity there, the genuine remorse, and she knew that this was a moment of grace, a chance for healing, for forgiveness. She reached out, taking Stinger's hand in hers. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for seeing us, for hearing us. Thank you for letting Aaliyah's voice touch your hearts." The Hell's Angels nodded, their throats too tight to speak. They knew that this was just the beginning, that they had a long journey ahead of them, but they also knew that they had been given a precious gift, a chance to be part of something greater than themselves. As Aaliyah and her family walked away, the sun shining on their faces, the bikers watched them go. And they knew that they would never forget this day, never forget the power of a child's song to change the course of their lives. They revved their engines, a salute to the man they had lost and the future they had gained. And as they rode off into the horizon, they carried with them the memory of Maverick and the hope of a better tomorrow. The days and weeks after Maverick's funeral were a time of profound change for the Hells Angels. They had been shaken to their core by Aaliyah's song, by the way it had stripped away their defenses and laid bare the ugliness that had taken root in their hearts. They knew that they couldn't go back to the way things had been, that they had to find a new way forward. And so, with a determination born of grief and guilt, they set about the task of making amends. It started with Aaliyah and her family. The bikers kept their word, paying for Aaliyah's music lessons and helping Serena with whatever she needed. They fixed the leaky roof on their house, bought groceries when money was tight, and even helped Jasmine with her homework. At first, it was awkward. The bikers fumbling with their words and their actions, unsure of how to bridge the gulf that lay between them. But gradually, as the weeks turned into months, something began to shift. Aaliyah's music became a regular feature at the Hells Angels gatherings. She would sing for them, her voice pure and clear, and they would listen, their faces softening with each note. They began to see her not as a symbol of their shame, but as a reminder of their potential for good. And as Aaliyah's confidence grew, so too did the bikers' sense of purpose. They started a scholarship fund in Maverick's name, dedicated to helping disadvantaged children pursue their dreams. They volunteered at local schools and community centers, using their skills and their strength to make a difference. The change in them was slow but steady, a gradual awakening of the better angels of their nature. They still wore their leather and their ink, still rode their bikes with a fierce pride. But now there was a new sense of responsibility, a recognition of the power they held and the duty they had to use it wisely. Serena watched it all with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. She had never imagined that her family's worst moment could lead to something so profound, so transformative. She saw the way the bikers looked at Aaliyah, the way they hung on her every word, and she knew that her daughter had a gift, a light that could guide even the most lost of souls. As the years passed, Aaliyah's talent only grew. She sang at weddings and funerals, at concerts and festivals. She became known as the Angel of the Hells Angels, a symbol of hope and redemption for a group that had once been synonymous with fear and violence. And through it all, the bikers were there, her constant companions and fierce protectors. They cheered her on from the front row, their faces beaming with pride. They were her uncles, her brothers, her family in all but blood. But even as Aaliyah's star rose, she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the lesson that Maverick had taught her, the power of compassion and forgiveness. She used her music to spread that message, to touch hearts and change minds in the way that only she could. She sang for the forgotten and the marginalized, for those who had been told they were less than, that they didn't matter. She sang for the addicts and the ex-cons, for the ones who had lost their way and needed a guiding light. And everywhere she went, the Hells Angels followed, a reminder of the long road they had traveled and the bonds that had been forged in the fires of tragedy and redemption. They were there the day Aaliyah graduated from high school, their bikes lined up in a gleaming row, their engines rumbling in salute. They were there when she got accepted to Juilliard, their whoops of joy echoing through the streets. And they were there when she came back home, years later, a star in her own right. She stood on the stage of the old church, the same one where she had sung for Maverick all those years ago. But this time, the pews were filled not just with bikers, but with people from all walks of life. There were suits and ties mixed in with the leather and denim, a testament to the power of Aaliyah's music to bring people together. As she sang, her voice soaring to the heavens, the Hells Angels wept once more. But this time, their tears were not of grief or shame, but of joy and pride. They had been given a second chance, a chance to be part of something greater than themselves. And they had taken that chance, had run with it with all the fierce determination of their wild hearts. When the song ended, the applause was deafening. Aaliyah took a bow, her eyes shining with tears of her own. And then, in a moment that would be remembered for years to come, she motioned for the Hells Angels to join her on the stage. They came, these rough and weathered men, their steps hesitant at first but growing more confident as they went. They stood behind her, a wall of strength and support, their faces shining with a love that knew no bounds. And as Aaliyah raised her voice once more, the bikers joined in, their rough harmonies blending with her pure tones. They sang of hope and redemption, of the power of second chances and the unbreakable bonds of family. It was a moment of pure, unbridled joy, a celebration of all that had been achieved and all that was yet to come. And as the music washed over the crowd, as the voices of the Hells Angels and their angel rose to the rafters, there was not a dry eye in the house. For in that moment, they were one family, one community, one beating heart. And though the road ahead would be long and winding, though there would be challenges and setbacks along the way, they knew that they would face them together, with the strength and the love that had been forged in the crucible of their shared history. As the final notes faded away, Aaliyah turned to face her family, her eyes shining with a fierce, unquenchable light. "Thank you," she said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "Thank you for believing in me, for believing in yourselves. Thank you for showing me the power of redemption, the strength of love. I am so proud to be a part of this family, now and forever." And as the Hells Angels gathered around her, their arms wrapped tight in a fierce, unbreakable embrace, they knew that they had found something precious, something worth fighting for. They had found a home, a purpose, a reason to be better than they had been before. They had found their angel, their guiding light, and they would follow her to the ends of the earth, through hell or high water, always and forever. For that was the power of love, the power of music, the power of one small girl with a voice that could change the world. And the Hells Angels knew, with a certainty that burned bright in their hearts, that they would never let that light go out. Not now, not ever.